And APB, American Protection Bureau, voted #1 best on Long Island for all your security needs. Call 631-390-9050. That's 631-390-9050. APB. M&J Video Games and Collectibles. Sport and non-sport cards, wrestling items, autographed items. We buy, sell, and trade. M&J Video Games and Collectibles, located at 1049 Queen Street, Southington, Connecticut. Call us at 1-860-479-9223 or 860-93-GAMES. M&J Video Games and Collectibles.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the initial episode of This Week in Pro Wrestling, featuring me, Bruce, and the one and only player, Benny Scala. What's up, Benny?
Bruce, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I came off of a very nice weekend because I am the player. I took one of the girlfriends to the dog track this weekend.
Awesome. Glad to hear. Hey, how did you guys make out?
I had a great time. She came in third. I'm very pleased.
Awesome. Well, there you go. You know, if you guys don't know who that is the player, Benny Scala from Dan and Benny in the Ring, and This Week in Pro Wrestling on the Monty and the Pharaoh channel.
Defending champion, actually.
Yeah. Rub it in. I think I came in last. It was a lot of fun.
You know what? There was no last in that game, Bruce. Everybody, I thought, did phenomenal, and we all had a great time. So we got to chat about wrestling, give our opinions. But what's better than that?
Nothing at all. Which is why we're here too, and another chance to have a great time talking about pro wrestling. This is This Week in Pro Wrestling History. Hey, Benny, you want to explain a little bit about what we're going to do?
Yes, absolutely. So what we're going to do is today is Monday, October the 2nd. What we're going to do is we are going to cover this Monday through Sunday. So that the dates of October 2nd through October the 8th. And so what we're going to do for each date, cover significant occurrences in the world of professional wrestling, whether it be last year or 60 years from now or from now.
Awesome. You know, you want to get this started?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, on October 2nd, 1990, in Ponoka, Alberta, Canada. Does that sound right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, where is that even? I mean, it's probably in a barn somewhere.
Yeah,
Population 3. They probably have a dry erase board, and they keep the tally of the town population on the dry erase board.
Like you said, somebody comes in, put one in, one left.
Oh, yeah. A baby born at the hospital, put another little check mark.
Nice. Well, this gentleman trained in the dungeon, and it's none other than Chris Jericho. He made his professional wrestling debut on this date in 1990, 30 years plus ago. 33 years.
33, yeah.
Wow. Can't believe it. What a legend.
One of the greatest of all time, in my opinion. The guy's, reinvented himself about 19 different times. I mean, I believe, and we kind of talked offline about this, I mean, he's kind of slowing down now. I think he's going to be 53 next month. But I mean, what a career. How many world championships? I mean, how many championships of every kind, intercontinental, United States, world tag team. I mean, winning in AEW, first WWE undisputed champion. The guy's on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, the guy, top 10 of all time, he's got to be. I can't say that I was a huge fan earlier in his career, but let's face it, the guy, he gave my respect and then some. I mean, I can't believe, like you said, he's maybe slowing down now, but up until a year or so, that guy was on fire still.
And how many memorable feuds has the guy had? I mean, the one he had with Shawn Michaels, and I might be wrong by a year to, I'd say around 2009, maybe. What an epic feud he had with Shawn Michaels, and then he had with CM Punk a few years later when Punk said he was the best in the world, and Jericho was the best in the world at what he did. And then after that was, you just made the list with Kevin Owens. I mean, he went on and on, never stopped.
Yeah, absolutely. So, next on this list, I know you want to talk a little bit about this in 1999 in Atlanta, Georgia.
Dateline October 2nd, 1999, Atlanta, Georgia, Psychosis. is awarded the WCW Cruiserweight Championship when Lenny Lane was pulled from TV. The word pulled from TV for a gay angle. And Lane was actually set to drop the title to Disco Inferno that following Monday night. But WCW did this in response to a possible protest by GLAAD, which was the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. I guess they thought that Lane was a little bit too much over the top. So, and Psychosis was actually he was said to have won the title at an unspecified live event. Typically, when a live event that's undisclosed, it's either parts unknown or Rio de Janeiro. But he actually dropped the title to Disco on October the 3rd. So, and bottom line, I'm wondering if how it felt to Lenny when he got pulled.
Yeah, dude, how would GLAAD react today? Because I don't know. I mean, it would be we're in a whole different ballgame now.
Yeah, I think at first he teamed with Lodi, and they had a tag team. They were dressed in hot pink, and I believe after that Lenny went solo, won the Cruiserweight Championship, held it for a while. I thought he did pretty well, actually. I ran into him. I lived in Minneapolis for a while, and I saw him at the Gold's Gym there in Minneapolis.
Nice
guy.
So let's move on. So on December 2nd in 2007 in Cleveland, Ohio, John Cena suffers a torn pec muscle in a match with Mr. Kennedy and has to vacate the WWE title after 380 days. Where would that reign have ended up if he hadn't have gotten hurt?
Yeah, you wonder how long they would have. I mean, that I think would have been the longest reign probably. And what was I'm trying to think. Bret Hart before him, possibly, in the 90s.
Yeah,
it had to be like the longest in at least 10 years. But who knows? And the amazing thing is, I think he was supposed to be out for, I think he said 7 or 8 months, and he was back within 4 months, which that was a Cena trademark. However long that the average person would take to recuperate from any kind of injury, Cena was back in half the time, it seemed.
Yeah, what an athlete. And, again, you can see the growth in the individual from when he was young to who he is now, and how the humbleness he was. And I remember him ripping apart The Rock at one point, and now he's so apologetic for those statements of him abandoning WWF and abandoning wrestling. And it's just it's really cool to see how much that guy's become mainstream too. I don't think he'll ever be the level of The Rock, but he's still quite the superstar.
And the thing is, he's been often criticized for not passing the torch, but I think he's done that on a number of occasions already, and I think he's still doing it. I think when he teams up, hopefully this does happen, teams up with LA Knight against the Bloodline at the Fastlane pay-per-view, which I think is next Saturday. I think he's doing this specifically to give the proverbial rub to LA Knight and push him to the next level. Because I think LA Knight is going to be the next megastar.
Yeah, it seems like they're positioning him for that. So what happened next? Where do we go? We're going to move on to
Dateline, October 2nd, 1999. Oh no, I just did that already. Actually, this is a good one. We're up to October 3rd. October 3rd, 1983, Memphis, Tennessee. Austin Idol defeats Stan Hansen for the AWA International Heavyweight title. And Austin Idol, for those of you, maybe the younger listeners here, he's one of those, to me, those what ifs. There's several what ifs. Gino Hernandez was a huge what if. What if he didn't kill himself with drugs? Magnum TA, Terry Allen, what if he didn't get in that car wreck? Idol's a little bit different. I mean, what ifs in that, he did have the plane crash, which I'm going to speak about in a minute, but he actually came to the WWF in 1973 under his real name, Mike McCord, and they pushed him pretty quick. He worked the program with then champion Pedro Morales, but he actually left the WWF despite Vince Sr. telling him personally that he had big plans for him, but because he didn't like the Northeast. He's from Tampa. And despite his kayfabe billing of Las Vegas, he's really from Tampa, Florida. But he just thought the Northeast was too cold. And a couple of years later, and there's going to be a couple of, ironically, two of the people we're going to talk about here were in plane crashes in the same year. But in February of 1975, he was with fellow wrestlers Bobby Shane, Buddy Colt, and Gary Hart, flying to, I believe, from Miami or thereabouts to the St. Pete. And I think the crash happened right over Davis Island, Florida. But Shane was killed, and both Colt and Hart's wrestling careers were over, although Gary Hart did reemerge as a manager, like one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest managers ever. But McCord, he actually returned to the ring a few months later, but then he took a couple of years off. And when he came back, now Mike McCord, if you look at any old YouTube video, the guy was husky. You could tell he was a power lifter. When he came back in 1978, he reemerged in Fritz Von Eric's world-class championship wrestling. But now instead of Mike McCord, he's Austin Idol. Totally different look. Now instead of a husky powerlifter, he looked like a bodybuilder. And guy had an amazing career. I mean, wherever he went, and he made about 7 different stops in Memphis. And every time he came back, they always threw him right in the main event because he was that charismatic. He had that hair versus hair match with Jerry Lawler, which if nobody's ever seen that on YouTube, I would highly recommend you see that. One of my favorite matches ever. And now, ironically, though, he never returned to the WWF. And you would have thought back in the early 80s when Vince Jr. bought the company, he would have been perfect for that, but never came back.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I only got to see him in his later career. In the late 80s, he did a couple of runs through the USWA and WCCW in Texas, and that's my only real exposure to him. But I know that he was quite the player back in his day.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe, he left, I think he quit around 89. I think he was only 40 when he left, when he quit wrestling. He never came back. Probably did it like an indie here and there or a guest appearance, but he got into real estate and supposedly made a lot of money buying and selling homes, properties. And I believe now he is in South Carolina, Greenville, I believe. And he has, I think it's called the Universal Wrestling College, I believe, something like that. So he's now operating a wrestling school.
Awesome. So let's move on. So on the 3rd of October in 1985 at the Meadowlands Arena in New Jersey, we had the second episode of Saturday Night's Main Event featuring Uncle Elmer's Wedding that got crashed. I mean, that was played throughout the late 80s over and over and over again. I was a little kid at this point, and I remember watching it, trying to stay up late just to watch the main events when they came on. They were quite the fun wrestling event. Vaguely remember.
Here's my question, Bruce. Has there ever been either a wrestling wedding, or a contract signing that went without violence?
No. Neither one, and I'm not a fan of either one, but they do seem to come up over and over and over again in the industry. What I'm wondering is, shouldn't we have a contract signing for every match then?
Right. I mean, that's my thing is, like, aren't these guys already on? You're being paid so much to wrestle. Why do you need a special contract just for this match?
Yeah, just so they can have that somebody go through the table, or that beat down outside the ring, or whatever is going to happen.
Now, honestly, I couldn't even tell you if Uncle Elmer ever got married that night or not. I do believe that he defeated Johnny Valiant that night, I believe, in 12 seconds, which I think at that time was a record.
Yeah, and Uncle Elmer disappeared very, very quickly after that too. Yeah, he wasn't really.
Where did he? I couldn't even tell you where he was before that.
Well, weren't they
that?
all brought in because Hillbilly Jim had gotten hurt somehow? Wasn't that the reason they had been brought in, just to kind of support him during that?
There was Cousin Junior, right? And there was Uncle Elmer, I believe.
So that was just when I was starting to kind of remember wrestling. I watched it earlier, but that's kind of where my brain kind of picks up.
And it's funny because that's kind of where I started tapering off, because it was too character and gimmick driven and less wrestling driven. And I grew up, I started watching wrestling in 1968.
Yeah.
And I was used to actually watching wrestling. Now I'm just watching a show. So my interest waned a bit. I've never given up wrestling, and I never will, but yeah, I wasn't really watching that closely at that time.
See, where I was the opposite. I was that little kid that Vince was trying to get in. I was that rock and wrestling kid, and Vince was cultivating me to be a fan for those next 10 years. So it's kind of funny how that works.
Well, you know that you're old when you look at like this state in wrestling, and you were already old then. So I mean, in 1985, I was 30.
Yeah, I was 8, 9 years old.
Okay, just an affirmation. Like I really need any more than an old man.
No, that was when my wrestling fan, and that's why I think this is going to be really cool. You have so much before me, and then I have that like right as you were leaving, I got into it, so this should be a lot of fun.
I think we can fill in the respective gaps. Yes, sir.
So let's talk about the next one on there. I know you want to talk about this one that led.
Dateline October 3rd, 2017, Memphis, Tennessee. Lance Russell passed away now. I really didn't know about Lance Russell growing up in New York. I mean, my staple was WWF, and then after a while, I was able to watch from wrestling from the Olympic Auditorium from Channel 41 in Paterson, New Jersey. And then once we got cable, then it kind of opened up a little bit. I got Georgia Championship Wrestling. I got Florida Championship Wrestling, World Class, I think Southwest Championship Wrestling, AWA. I mean, to me, the more the merrier. But I only learned of Memphis wrestling probably in the last, I would say, 10 years. And I mean, I knew Jerry Lawler came from there. I knew Jimmy Hart came from there. I knew Jeff Jarrett came from there. But I really didn't know much about Lance Russell. But like the more I have learned about Lance Russell, the more videos I've seen of Lance Russell. I mean, he is, to me, him and Gordon Soley are 1 and 1A, and they're interchangeable. I wouldn't say one was any better than the other. Gordon Soley was more somber and more serious, and Lance Russell was a little bit more of a showman.
Yeah, a little more animated.
But they were both, I mean, unbelievable. My Mount Rushmore of wrestling announcers are Gordon Soley, Lance Russell, Jim Ross, and Bob Caudle, who is the Mid-Atlantic announcer.
I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, if you, I believe on Peacock now, the WWF and WWE channel there, I believe they have the territories. Actually, there's a podcast called Mid-Atlantic Podcast, and you can hear they actually play some of the the broadcasts, and you can listen to. He was very, very good. Nothing spectacular, but just really, really steady and just got you hooked into the action. But Lance Russell, just to me, like anything that happened there, even that with Andy Kaufman, Lance Russell was always in the middle of it. We had Shane Russell was one of my guests on Dan and Benny in the Ring, and just if you haven't listened to that, he really did a good job of describing his dad and his career and his life, and just one of those guys. Like when I think of wrestling now, I think of Lance Russell.
I was fortunate when I was a kid. I got to see him on ESPN every pretty much 2 to 3 days a week. They would replay at 4 p.m. old WCCW and USWAs, and that's my exposure to him. So what a legend there.
And I got to go on my soapbox here, and I know Mike's going to be mad because I do this a lot, but we
it's our show. You go on your soapbox.
That's right. Yeah. Screw you, Mike. We have this endless debate about how Vince McMahon made wrestling better. Now, did he make it bigger in terms of making it national? Absolutely. But did he make it better for the fans? So, I mean, my name is Joe McGillicuddy. I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's 1981. I can go every Monday night to the Mid-South Coliseum. Every Monday night, I can go 52 times a year and watch Jerry Lawler. I can watch Bill Dundee. I can watch Jimmy Valiant. I can watch Jimmy Hart. I can watch Austin Idol. Or I'm Benny McGillicuddy, and I live in Tampa, Florida. Every Tuesday night in 1981, I can go to the Homer Hesterly Auditorium, and I can see Kevin Sullivan. I can see Eddie Graham. I can see Dusty Rhodes. I mean, I can see Maniac Mark Lewin, the Purple Haze, Bugsy McGraw, you name it. To me, wrestling was an intimate thing because if you're in an arena even if you go half the time, you go 25 times a year, those wrestlers, they see you there all the time. They get familiar with you, and you kind of feel like you know them. And now, I mean, fast forward to 2023, I live about 20 miles from Tampa, Florida. They might come here, once, twice a year. And I'm going to be one of, 25,000 people at the Amalie Arena, whatever it holds. To me, wrestling was supposed to be a small, intimate thing. I mean, I don't know when you started watching, but we used to have spot shows at the local high school, maybe 500 people. I saw a show in, I guess it was 1987 in Hagerstown, Maryland. And the main event was Billy Jack Haynes versus the Iron Sheik. There might have been 700 people there. But I mean, I had a great time, and they don't have that anymore. And that's what Vince McMahon has taken away from us. He's made himself a billionaire, but are we better off by him doing that? And my opinion is no.
Yeah, I love watching the old stuff. I think there's been so much that's been lost. I think that the storytelling has really been lost in this day and age of the gymnastics end of it. There's too much. There's too many flips, too many false finishes. Nothing seems to hurt anybody anymore. I didn't know there were that many Supermen out there.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, if Bruno got you in the back breaker or the back breaker or the bear hug,
you were done.
It was it. If Lawler gave you a pile driver or Paul Orndorff, you weren't kicking out. I mean, superstar Billy Graham, the bear hug, you weren't getting out of that. The finisher was truly a finish. There are no finishers. I mean, you get powerbomb through 18 tables. 30 seconds later, you're making a comeback. That's ridiculous.
So, Benny, we have to take a quick break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
All right.
Elm Logistics. For all your logistic needs, call 631-299-3595. That's 631-299-3595. Elm Global Logistics. Pride, performance, and partnerships. The Monty and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
And we are back with Bruce and Benny the Player. What's going on, Benny?
I took a brief nap while we had our commercial break, but I'm ready to go again.
So you're all rejuvenated?
I'm charged up. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So let's talk about this next event. This could have changed. This event did change wrestling history, but could have changed wrestling history in a whole different ballgame.
You're talking about Dateline, October 4th, 1975, Wilmington, North Carolina. Ric Flair survives a plane crash, which killed the pilot and permanently disabled the great Johnny Valentine. So we already talked about Austin Idol surviving a plane crash. Idol had 2 broken ankles and broken ribs, and he actually was able to return several months later. Flair was in a plane crash with Johnny Valentine, Bob Bruggers, and Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods. Flair, I think, broke his back in 3 different places.
Yeah.
But, it's really funny. Of course, the rest is history. Flair came back, and he actually changed his style. He was another one like Austin Idol. He was a husky guy, kind of a power style.
He was huge.
Yeah, he probably was close to 300 pounds. Came back, slimmed down, more of a bodybuilder physique. But here's the funny part: is that Tim Woods, who was Mr. Wrestling, was in the crash, and at the time, Woods was a babyface. Flair and Valentine were heels, and Woods was feuding with the two of them, and kayfabe was so strictly adhered to that there were rumors swirling around that Woods was in the same plane. And back in 1975, that kind of stuff didn't happen. I mean, the heels were on one side of the fence, and the baby faces were on the other, and never the twain shall meet, except in the ring. And Woods was so devoted to wrestling that he actually appeared in the ring 2 weeks later after the crash, just to prove that he was not in the plane. It's like, how could I have been in the plane? Here I am 2 weeks later. And according to Ric Flair, that actually it saved wrestling, according to Flair, that Woods did that just for the sport of professional wrestling, just to protect kayfabe. And what a change to 2023 when nobody really cares about that.
Hey, what's kayfabe now? Jeez.
Yeah. That's some girl that I dated. Her name was kayfabe. Yeah.
Because I keep seeing all this stuff with them. Everybody's upset with Rhea Ripley announcing that she was engaged. Listen, we all know she was dating a guy from AEW. What's the big deal? We know the Dom, we know the Dom mommy angle isn't real. Come on, we're in 2023. So
it's really not. Oh, geez, man, that burst my bubble.
So what do we got next? So next on the October 4th, 1993, in Columbus, Georgia, Buff Bagwell and Too Cold Scorpio defeated the Nasty Boys to win the WCW World Tag Team Championship. So, well, this was relatively early in Buff's career, and not a big fan of the Nasty Boys, but you know what? They are a legendary tag team. What was the big significance of this championship run, do you think?
Buff, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but it seemed like in WCW he became more of a tag team specialist, where I thought he should have been a main eventer. And he won with Scotty Riggs. Who else did he win with? He won 4 or 5 WCW tag team championships with a number of different partners. But I could never get why he wasn't in contention for the world title. And then when WCW closed up in 2001 and he came to WWE, he wrestled one match, I believe, against Booker T in Seattle, and he was gone.
Well, I think he have a little bit of high self-worth for himself too.
He had a very, very high self-opinion of himself, and not too many people agree with him. The guy had a $1 million body and a $7 brain, apparently.
Yeah, he did. He did have the package, but yeah, I'm surprised he never went bigger. So next we have also on October 4th. This is in 2006. World Wrestling Entertainment premieres The Marine at Camp Pendleton. What do you think about that?
How many Marines were there in total?
I think there were 4, 5, 6, 38, something like that.
And the Marine 63 is in a walker. So was it Cena first, then Ted DiBiase Jr., and then The Miz?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so.
I have to confess that I have seen 0 minutes of The Marine.
I have to confess I've seen 0 minutes of any of the Marines.
And I have to confess that the under-over is that I will never see any minutes of The Marine.
Here's the one thing I will say. This is one of the things I do respect Vince McMahon for. He really does care a lot about our armed forces. And, this was to honor them. So, thank you, Vince, for that.
I will never be accused of being a Vince McMahon fan ever. But there are attributes like we were talking about when Monty and the Pharaoh were on Dan and Benny. We were talking about Tony Khan versus Vince McMahon. And as much as I do not like Vince McMahon, I have to say unequivocally that none of the shenanigans like what happened with Punk, that stuff would never happen in WWE because everybody knew who was in charge there. And you knew that if you crossed a certain line, you're going to be out of a job, where that doesn't happen in AEW. So I give Vince McMahon, the guy was a great leader and didn't agree with all his decisions, but and then like you said, yeah, he paid homage to the military. Got to give him credit for that.
Let's move on to October 5th, 1997 in Bloomington, Minnesota. Brian Pillman was found dead in his hotel room at the age of 35.
So sad.
Wow. Yeah,
so sad.
What a waste of an amazing talent. That guy, the loose cannon angle. The guy was just, he had it all. He was a total package. Definitely world championship material. He and Steve Austin were awesome together. Yeah, very sad day in wrestling. And, I don't really have much more to say. I really wish.
I don't think he was ever the same, honestly. I have to say, as far as like the Hollywood Blondes in WCW, to me, is one of the best tag teams ever.
Absolutely.
I don't think they get the credit that they deserve. Very, very underrated tag team. They were great together. I didn't think Pillman could pull off the heel thing, and he did it to perfection. But that car accident that left him with a fused ankle, I think that was his undoing. He was never the same after that, both physically and psychologically. But anytime anybody dies at the age of 35, he's another what if. I mean, if he hadn't had that accident and kept his head on straight, I agree with you. I think at some point he would have become a world champion.
No, I wonder. I wonder if the painkillers also got hit, because that was that era where they were really pushing those painkillers out like candy.
I think they each had a Hello Kitty Pez dispenser, and instead of putting Pez in it, they put pain pills.
Yeah. When I got to talk to Duke Drosy this past week, it was kind of enlightening what these guys have to go through with their bodies, and they're in constant pain.
Yeah, we as fans, we take it for granted, but talk to any of these guys, and I've had Baby O'Hannon on our podcast several times, and the guy's had, I believe, about 14 different surgeries. And you wouldn't think of him as somebody who was really mixed it up and took a lot of bumps, but he did. I mean, they all do.
Yeah. So Mike's interrupting our talk right now. I sent him a text on something earlier, and he finally responded. As I thought it was going to be something on our show, but it wasn't. But okay, let's move on. Same day, October 5th, 1997, the first Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. And what was the big outcome of this? The debut of The Undertaker's brother, Kane. Now that was some entrance he had.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, Bruce, but I was still watching pretty regularly at that point. But when I saw Kane, I did another gimmick. I gave Kane a shelf life of 6 months, and boy, oh boy, was I proven wrong, because he just kept going and going. And Glenn Jacobs was a hell of a performer.
He really was. I mean, he reinvented himself, and now when he comes back as that big red machine, look at the pop he gets. But
now he's a mayor.
Yeah, no, that's crazy, absolutely insane. So let's move on to 1999, same date, Uniondale, Long Island, New York. Another sad day in wrestling. Darren Drozdov was severely injured during his match with D'Lo Brown. Yeah, I've watched that match several times, and I mean, I've seen bumps so much worse than that, and spots so much worse than that have done no damage, and it's just so unfortunate for Darren that happened.
It's really funny though, Bruce. I mean, in my lifetime, and it hasn't been recent, but I mean, I have squatted 500 pounds, and I mean, does it feel good? No, but I mean, after I was done, I mean, I was kind of a bit sore, but I've had worse pain where I just turned the wrong way. You just go bend down to pick something. You just turn to hear what somebody said, and I just tweak my back, and I'm in agony. So you never know. It's just whatever happened, he just got hit right, and I don't want to say the right spot, definitely the wrong spot. And what a shame. He was another up and coming guy, young guy, had a great career in front of him, and that was it.
Yeah. So let's move on to October the 6th in 1935. I know you want to talk about this one.
My hero, Bruno Sammartino, the GOAT. And, I get very upset when I watch TV, I watch SmackDown, and they call John Cena the greatest of all time. Bullshit. There's nobody in Bruno's class, and there never will be. But Bruno Sammartino was born in Abruzzi, Italy, actually a little town called Pizzicato. And I'm not going to get into Bruno's career. I'm just going to get into his childhood. When Bruno was, I believe, about 8 or 9, so he grew up right in the beginning of World War II, and the Germans actually took over his town, took over his house. And he was forced with his mother, his brother, and his sister to actually take cover in the mountains. They called it Valoraka, which I'm not really sure what it means, but it was a mountain, and they all lived up there, many, many families. He lived in a tent. At times he ate dandelions or snow just to survive. And his mother, who he said is the bravest person he's ever met, his mother would actually make a trip down from the mountains to their house because they had she stored provisions in the basement of the house, wheat, corn, things like that, so they could have food to eat in the winter. She would actually, sneak into the basement of the house when at the time when German soldiers are in the house, and it was about a day and a half trip each way. And he'd wait and wait and wait. And like 3 days later, she'd reappear. She actually got shot one time by the soldiers. But I believe when he was 12 or 13, he contracted rheumatic fever. And his mom, you talk about old school, actually applied leeches on him to suck out the poison. And he survived. And it took him, he did not come to this country until 1950 when he was, I believe, 14 and a half. When he came, and it was only because he was not healthy enough to pass, I guess, whatever physical he needed to pass to come here. He weighed 83 pounds when he came at 14 years old. And he got to Pittsburgh, got beat up by the kids in school. He spoke no English, skinny kid, got picked on. And I guess eventually there was a friend of theirs that referred him to wasn't the YMCA, it was the Young Men's Jewish Association. I think equivalent to YMCA, but and Bruno walked in at like 15 or 16, saw the weights, and he said, I knew there was something good in there for me. And that's the rest is history.
Yeah, the legend, the true GOAT. I don't think anybody can deny that. There's nobody who's going to ever match his reigns.
No.
Roman's reign will not. Listen, do I think he's going to beat Hulk Hogan? Absolutely. I don't know how much further than that they're going to go.
But keep in mind, Bruno was only a 2-time champion. Not like when people say, well, he's a 14-time champion. Yeah, but Bruno was champion.
Times.
Right. But the only reason Bruno he gave up the title at, I think it was 7 years and 8 months to Koloff. That was the first time. That was the second time. The first time, he just was tired. I mean, he'd been on the road, 300 days a year for almost 8 years wrestling night. I mean, Roman Reigns defended the title in those 3 years, maybe 25 times. Bruno in that same time period probably defended it at least 600 or 700 times.
Yeah, I know.
So come on.
I was surprised when I started to look at my local history. My grandfather used to tell me about going to one of our local venues called the Avalon. It's a little skating rink. It's no longer there, but they used to come up, and I mean, Bruno was there. Everybody was anybody, but yeah, they would tour all over into little towns. Yeah, that's what kept them going.
Bruno wanted to go home and spend time with his family. They weren't telling him, "Hey, Bruno, we're going to take the belt off you. We're going to put Koloff over." Bruno said, "I'm going home. You need to find a replacement." And then they found Koloff as a transitional champion, and then they segued to Pedro because they couldn't do at that time they wouldn't do a babyface versus babyface title match, even though they did do it a couple of years later. But Bruno gave up the title both times. So he could have been the champion 20 years running if he wanted to.
So I got a question for you, being that you were around in that era. So when I was a little kid, when they would announce Pedro Morales, they would always say, former Intercontinental great Pedro Morales. It wasn't until a few years later when I started doing learning my wrestling history, that I learned that he was heavyweight champion. Why did they focus so much on him being the Intercontinental?
I don't know, maybe because it was the last thing that happened. But yeah, I mean, Pedro, Koloff had the title, I think, for 20 days or 21 days. And I believe it was sometime in January 1971 that Pedro beat Koloff. I think it was at the Garden. And Pedro had the title almost 3 years. He lost in December. I think it was December 1st, 1973, to Stan Stasiak. And then, again, segued the title back to Bruno. Stasiak had the title for 9 days, and Bruno beat him on December the 10th. And then Bruno held the title for another 3+ years, even though they told him, Bruno, we only want you to hold the title for a year. We're going to groom a replacement. And after the third year, he said, look, you guys got to find somebody. And that's when they had him drop it to Billy Graham. But again, that was his doing. They weren't telling him somebody's going to, we want to put somebody over you. Bruno was saying, look, I want to go home. You need to find somebody else.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, Pedro was a good champion. I mean, Bruno was my hero. And, when Pedro became the champion, honestly, thinking like, this isn't Bruno. But as time went on, he kind of grew on me. He was a good champion.
So let's move on. We'll talk about another legend. I know you want to talk about this, and this is on also on October 6, 1999. This one happened in Wilmingboro What is that? Wilmingboro Turnpike?
Willingboro Township, New Jersey. So, the great Gorilla Monsoon, Robert Morella, passed away at the age of 62. And I have very fond memories of Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon was the very first heel to babyface turn that I ever saw. I believe it was either late 1968 or early 1969. Bruno, I don't know what happened to his partner, but Bruno was wrestling with a partner, Toru Tanaka and Mitsu Arakawa, and wound up being a 2-on-1. And Bruno's being attacked. And then I hear Ray Morgan saying, "Here comes Gorilla Monsoon." And I'm thinking like, oh shit, now it's 3-on-1. And to my surprise and shock, Monsoon, he got rid of the two Japanese guys, the villainous duo. And the funny thing is, though, he was billed for Manchuria. The legend is that Bobby Davis, his manager, found him wading naked through a stream in Manchuria. Spoke no English. In reality, he went to Ithaca College, and very, very intelligent man. But he went from, only grunting before this. Next thing you know, he's got a nice haircut, no more beard, and he started speaking fluent English in a matter of a week. Go figure, right? But I have to say, too, as far as Gorilla Monsoon, him and Bobby Heenan were, for my money, they were the best duo in the history of wrestling. The chemistry they had with each other. We could talk the rest of the show about that.
Primetime wrestling. That was my wrestling youth. Primetime wrestling, Wrestling Challenge, Bobby the Brave Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. They were
how good were they?
They were awesome. I mean, and realizing they were best of friends outside of that, and the banter back and forth. It was just, it was great.
I'll never forget when, right after he passed away, when at that point Bobby Heenan had moved on to WCW and he was commentating with Tony Schiavone, and Bobby said something about Gorilla passing away. And Bob, even then he was still a heel announcer, and you could see that he teared up very visibly and very quickly. You could tell how heartbroken the guy was, and I never felt the same way about Bobby Heenan after that. I thought, this Bobby Heenan's a good guy. I mean, for him to feel that way about somebody, he's not what he portrays himself to be.
So, all right. Well, listen, it's about that time. We got to take another quick break. You want to send us to this break?
We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
All right.
Hi, it's John from Under the Table Hot Sauce. I'm here with my friend, the star of the show, Jimmy Farrow.
Yeah, what's up, JB?
Nah, nothing.
It's been a hot summer, and for all your barbecue needs, you can go to underthetablehotsauce.com. 13 unique flavors to choose from, created and bottled in a Long Island kitchen. Underthetablehotsauce.com. Let's go chow, JB.
Let's do it.
All the flavor, twice the burn.
Sir?
Ah.
Manscaped?
Uh-huh.
Have you tried the new equipment that's been sent?
I'm afraid because it says weed whacker. I'm scared.
Maven, Manscaped, what are you thinking about
Love
Manscaped,
it.
dude?
Love it.
What do you use it for?
Necessity. What don't I use it for? Put it this way. The only hair I have on my entire body is these eyebrows.
Yeah.
That you see. These caterpillars racing to the middle of my nose. That's it.
That is it.
That's all I have. And that's all I want.
That's the
So Manscaped is a
You-
must.
We were talking before the show. There's nothing worse than just hair.
Yeah.
Right? Hair on a woman, hair on a man. It's just bad.
Absolutely. And it's the one thing that the older I get, it starts growing more in unwanted areas.
Absolutely.
I hate it.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Uh-oh.
Just going to go out there.
Oh, boy.
Go for it.
You're doing a deed.
Yes.
Again, I don't want you to have to admit this because as men, we try not to admit this. But if you're going to
Oh,
go
I
do
know
the deed
where-
on a
I
woman,
know where
would you
he's
rather
going.
have her be hairless or a little hair, racing stripe, or
Racing stripe.
full retro bush?
Racing stripe.
Retro Bush is out.
Yes, thank you.
Retro Bush is out.
Yeah.
I don't mind a small, well manicured landing strip. Every now and then, if it's completely, and I'm talking like baby's ass bald, then I start. Where is that pedophilia line? I don't want to wander into that.
That's
thought
very
of it like
interesting.
that.
I never thought about that. You're a
Wow.
smart dude. Holy shit.
So if the landing strip is clean enough for the plane to go in smoothly, you're cool with that?
If the landing strip is has, like I said, well manicured.
Yeah,
You can see both sides. It's not
Like blinking lights on both sides of that.
I just don't. I don't want. I don't want the shrubbery going off into unwanted areas on that as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Oh, look
but-
what you found. Ooh.
I got to be all honest though. Hey, the older I get though, I don't think I can be as
I found it. I found
Have
it.
you ever gone down there and she slowly brings down the underwear? Then
What is
retro? Just,
Absolutely.
You're like, whoa!
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Like
46,
it
of
pops
course.
out?
Do you like walk out or what do you do?
No, I muster through. I muster up the courage to get
He's
through.
a trooper. He's a trooper. Got to give him an A.
Not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah,
There you go.
I hear you.
There you
Listen,
go.
I couldn't
Super
say.
Bush.
I couldn't say. Well, if you have the same beliefs as Maven, does Manscaped could help you?
Absolutely.
The weed whacker.
Absolutely.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that I may have to, go in a room, close the door, and hang out with the weed whacker for a little while.
Yeah, I think you're a retro guy, aren't you?
I like 70s adult films, if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
but
only
with that,
Ron
we're going to take a
Jeremy,
quick
Batman.
commercial break, and we'll be
Anyway.
back with this wrestling icon, Maven.
We will see you in a drop kick second.
Drop kick.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. So here we go. October 7th, 1972, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Ken Patera announces he's retiring as an Olympic weightlifter to become a professional wrestler. And Ken was our guest on Dan and Benny in the Ring on our 100th episode. And we actually was recently replayed on the Monty and the Pharaoh YouTube channel. That man has no filter. And you talk about somebody who, I try to.
And I love that he still did ice story the rock the boulder through the window now.
Oh no, yeah, he didn't do that. No, that was a disgruntled ex-employee. I mean, I believe him because I don't want to disagree with him. Put it that way.
Exactly.
But one of the smartest decisions ever that the guy wanted to the history of mankind. Patera was a star wherever he went. I mean, now this is something that would never happen again. In 8/21, 1980. He wins the WWF Intercontinental Championship. He defeats Pat Patterson. And then 4 days later, he went in, I believe it was in St. Louis, he wins the NWA Missouri Heavyweight Championship. And that was one of the most prestigious territory titles there was against Kevin Von Erich. So, in the span of 4 days, he wins like the second biggest WWF championship. And he wins arguably, besides the NWA title, probably the second best territory title. He was that good. And Bruno, according to Patera, Bruno actually wanted to drop his title to him, but Vince Sr. decided on Billy Graham because Vince Sr. had very, very close ties to Eddie Graham in Florida, and at the time, superstar Billy Graham was wrestling down there, so it was close. And I do believe that Patera could have, and now maybe he didn't have the charisma of superstar Billy Graham, but I think he could have carried that for 10 months.
Yeah, my exposure to Ken Patera was when they tried to when they brought it back to WWE when he didn't have the bleached blonde hair and brought it back as a face as the former Olympic great in I believe it was 86 or 87 when they were really trying to bring him back as a face and reinvent his image there.
And they pretty much jobbed him out.
Yeah, absolutely. So next we have on 10/7/1984, Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the biggest feuds ever.
Yeah. Wahoo McDaniel defeats Manny, the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, to win the NWA United States Championship. And what can you say about both of these guys? Regarding Wahoo, I've seen it's a Ric Flair, Wahoo McDaniel 2 out of 3 Falls match on YouTube. I believe it was from Daytona Beach. And I think it might have been at the time Wahoo was the U.S. champion. Flair was the world champion. Was one of the best matches I've ever seen. Those guys beat the ever-loving shit out of each other. And it looks so believable. But both Manny and Wahoo, both these guys were tougher than dirt. And I watch AEW. I see a moron like Orange Cassidy with his hands in his pockets. I wonder what would happen if he pulled that crap with Wahoo or Manny. Like we'd be talking about the guy in the past tense. And I know Manny's been a guest on Monty and the Pharaoh several times. Both of these guys are just a real deal. That's all I really can say.
Yeah, I had the honor of actually interviewing Manny Fernandez and Tommy Rich down with Mike and Jimmy. It was awesome, and I was talking to Manny outside, and he was talking about their strap matches. And they toured the country doing these, and I guess at one point Manny turns to Wahoo and says, "Well, that's all you got." And the rest of it went down in history. They were beating the heck out of each other with those straps. So awesome, really, really nice, down to earth guy too. It was an honor meeting him.
Yeah, definitely love Manny.
So next we had on October 7th, 2001, in Waxahachie,
which was the I don't know if it was the kayfabe home or the real home of Dick Murdoch, but gentleman Chris Adams, another what if guy.
Absolutely.
He was awaiting trial for manslaughter, was shot and killed by a friend during a drunken brawl. Chris Adams is a huge talent. Yeah. Phenomenal wrestler, great on the mic, in my mind. He was the first guy that I saw do the super kick, and I still think he did it better than anyone. And ironically, trained Stone Cold, worked with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who reportedly called him a pile of crap. I guess he was a bit of a scammer.
Yeah, my going back to the WCCW days when he was the face and teaming with the Von Erichs, that was my major exposure to him. And that was back in he actually, didn't he do a blind angle or something?
Yes, he did. You are correct.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that. Just popped into my head. But awesome. So
huge talent. Just couldn't keep his head on straight.
Yeah. So now let's go into Chicago in 2007. We have we have two things here. Which one is they're both
so I mean, and I didn't watch this, but the No Mercy pay-per-view, I guess Triple H beat Randy Orton, and then later on Randy Orton beat Triple H on the same night.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. It was I was not around at that point, but that sounds pretty crazy. That sounds WWE-ish.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, they at that point the titles were changing hands way, way, way too often. I really like now that they're putting the titles on people for longer periods and really making a win of the titles seem like it's important.
I mean, back in the day, like before I'd say Harley Race, and you had Briscoe had the title for 2 or 3 years. Dory Jr. had the title for 4 years. I mean, Bruno had the title for 8 years, and then he had it for almost 4 years. I mean, even Hulk, his first time, I think he had it for 4 years. You typically didn't trade a title off like in a matter of weeks or months.
No, but that early 2000s, how many championship runs were there per year?
Now they measure it in days.
Yeah. Yep. So let's move on to 2015. This was actually a really, really important event. Bayley defeated Sasha Banks in a 30-minute Iron Woman match. Two legendary women wrestlers here. Really, this is the beginning of that new era of women's wrestling that we have now. I never would have thought that women's wrestling would be where it is. I mean, we have several companies with established women's rosters, women's tag team champions. It's a whole different world. Who would have ever thought?
Well, I mean, look at the hoopla from recently when Jade Cargill signed with WWE. I mean, 10 years ago, if a women wrestler traded companies, who would have really even cared? But now, I mean, they're right in the forefront, and rightly so. They deserve to be.
Absolutely. And some of these women's matches have blown some of the men's matches out of the water anymore.
The recent match that I saw with Asuka and Io Sky, one of the best matches I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, look at that talent there, man, unbelievable. So let's move on to December 8th, 1978 in Dallas, Texas. What's going on there?
All right, so this is a story within a story. So in October 8th, 1978, Evelyn Stevens defeated Moolah to end her fourth reign as NWA Women's Champion, but lost it 2 days later. So there's a lot more to this story. And, a lot of people think that Moolah won the title in 1956 by beating Tits McGee and holding it for 28 years until she dropped it to Wendy. I don't know if she beat Tits McGee, whoever she beat, until she dropped it to Wendy Richter. But au contraire, mon frere, she did drop it a number of times. This was one of them. Another one was to Sue Green, Tex Green, who was a guest on Dan and Benny in the Ring, because Moolah made the mistake of slapping her in the face really hard before the match. And Sue Green shot on her, made her tap out, and kept the title. But so where the story with Moolah ends, the story with Evelyn Stevens just begins. And my very good friend Javier Oist, who writes for Pro Wrestling Stories, wrote a very good story about this. But Evelyn Stevens was initially married to the spoiler, Don Jardine. They got divorced, and then she married a gym owner named Frank Riegel. But in December of 1986, she actually shot and killed a guy, was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but somehow was pardoned 5 years later, and she's alive and well here in Tampa, Florida. What a story.
So how did the WWF get away with saying that Moolah held the title from 1958 to 2000 or until 1984?
I mean, I remember when the buildup with Richter. I mean, all I heard them say, and I could be wrong. I mean, it's been a while, but I don't ever remember them saying that she had an interrupted reign. They just said she's been the women's champion for 28 years.
Yep.
They never said she lost, but in reality, she lost a number of times.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to 1986 in Tampa, Florida. Barry Windham and Ron Bass defeats Ron Bass to win the NWA Florida Heavyweight Championship.
Yeah. And Barry was a phenomenal guest, recent guest on Monty and the Pharaoh. And Barry Windham I call it wrestling royalty. Barry Windham was wrestling royalty. He was in the 1980s, him, Flair, and Steamboat, to me, were the three best wrestlers. And, Barry and Ron Bass had a heated feud for several years. And Florida, like I said before, that was one of those territories. I mean, people don't realize that back in the day, like going to early 80s, if you were ambitious and you had a car, a working car, they were in Orlando on Sunday, West Palm on Monday, Tampa, Tuesday in Tampa, Miami on Wednesday, and I think Jacksonville on Friday. I forget where they went on Thursday, but they did this for years and years and years. So, I mean, how much wrestling you got to see in person was totally dependent on just either how much money you had. But back in the day, again, the tickets were very affordable, and what kind of working car you had and what kind of schedule you had. But I mean, like I said, I could maybe see professional wrestling 5 times a year, maybe. But back then you could see it hundreds of times.
So I'm wondering. So wasn't exposed to the Florida wrestling at that point, just being up here in the Northeast. But was Ron Bass doing that blackjack cowboy type gimmick then?
Yeah, I believe he was. I mean, they had so many characters. That was when Kevin Sullivan introduced he never said satanic, but for all intents and purposes, it was, his cult, which had Bob Roop, who was Maya Singh, Mark Lewin, who was the Purple Haze, Woman, Nancy Benoit was, I think, the Fallen Angel. I mean, a whole bunch of them. I mean, and the angle with him and Billy Graham, where he blinded Billy Graham, and Billy Graham did that promo in the desert. And if you've never seen that, just type in on YouTube, Billy Graham, Break the Chains That Bind Me. Unbelievable as far as a promo.
So awesome. Now I'm going to look that up when we wrap this up. So let's move on to 2001. Steve Austin defeats Kurt Angle to win the WWF Championship. Well, I mean, Kurt Angle, what can you say about that talent? And Steve Austin, for such a short career in ring, man, that guy, especially as a main eventer, I mean, he broke down so many boundaries. Kurt Angle and Steve Austin's feud was legendary. The milk truck angle, the beer truck. Yeah, it was so much fun. Steve Austin, great talent. Kurt Angle, great talent. You can never go wrong with any of their matches.
No, I mean, and I was shocked that Kurt Angle evolved into the personality that he was, because I just looked at him as an Olympic athlete, pretty dry, pretty colorless. Once they turned him heel, he hit the ground running, and he never looked back.
I still love that cowboy hat. Every time I see that angle, I laugh. I've seen it, so many times over the years.
And that never gets old.
It really does. And I recently saw him. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and the guy, he's so charismatic, and he is a very intelligent man. And to hear those stories of him, wrestling hurt and how he got to be such a great wrestler, it's unbelievable. They would
broken freaking neck.
Yeah, he would wrestle till pure exhaustion, and then his coach would make him start wrestling. So
right.
Let's move on. Now we've got 2012, Branford, Connecticut.
I saved the best for last. Not really. I saved the worst for last. So Tammy Sitch, a.k.a. Sonny, arrested for the fourth time in a month for violating a protective order. And this lady, and I use that term about as loosely as she is, she's gone down more times than the Titanic. Rumor has it she's having surgery to implant ball bearings in her kneecaps. She can move around a little bit faster, if you know what I mean. And if you look at this picture dictionary under hot mess and train wreck, you're going to see a picture of that. And besides what she did to Chris Candido, which was not very nice, she's just like a tropical storm. She just leaves ruin and destruction wherever she landed. And on March 25th, 2022, she crashed into the back of a parked car right here in Ormond Beach, Florida, close by here, killing the driver of the car. She pleaded no contest. I believe she's been in jail for the last year and a half.
And she's still there right now.
Or yeah, I don't think she's going to be getting out anytime soon.
And she shouldn't. She's violent.
No, good riddance.
Absolutely. That woman is a menace to society. And do not give her a car. She's gotten in more car accidents with no license. She just does not learn her lesson and does not have any regard for the rest of humanity.
Right. Totally agree.
So, wow. So Benny, that was a lot of fun. We got through that.
What a week we had. What a week in history.
What a week of wrestling history. And listen, we only touched on some stuff. I mean, there's a lot more we could have brought in, but this is just scratching the surface. And so let's talk about this. So which of these things do you think had the biggest impact on professional wrestling? And I think we might both agree with it on this one.
I don't know. I'm going to go old school and say October 6, 1935, the birth of Bruno. Without Bruno, if Bruno Sammartino did not come to the WWF first he was there first in 1960 and then back in 1963, and that's when he won the title. You think about it, it wasn't that big of it was just a territory. When Vince Sr. Decided to promote the Ali and Oki match as not that he promoted it, but he included it as part of the showdown at Shea, and the tickets weren't selling. The pay-per-view buys weren't selling, and Bruno had broken his neck, I think, 3 months before, but Stan Anthony gave a lot of people think it was a lariat. It wasn't a lariat. It was a botched body slam, but Bruno was lying in the hospital, and Vince McMahon calls him in the hospital. Hey, Bruno, we really need you. And he goes, I'm lying here with a broken neck. I don't know if I'm ever be able to walk again, let alone wrestle. And Bruno somehow came back and saved the day with allegedly, and we don't really know, but allegedly, if that did not happen, Vince Sr. could have went bankrupt. And if that happened, then we're not sitting here talking about wrestling probably.
No, I mean, you have to look at the legendary runs of that man. If we did, in the Northeast, wrestling would not be wrestling if it weren't for Bruno Sammartino.
Well, and if it wasn't for wrestling in the Northeast, Vince Jr., he might have did something else for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, we both agree on that. I had a feeling we were going to agree on the most important on that list. But awesome, Benny, it's been a blast. I really enjoy talking wrestling history with you. We'll get to do this again next week.
Pleasure is all mine, and I really enjoyed it. And like you said, I mean, when I did some of the research, I mean, I literally had to pick and choose because there were so many. I think we covered 24 events. I mean, there had to be 100. And I had to just pick out what I thought maybe was meaningful. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen next week?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for this week in wrestling, next week in wrestling, who knows? So, for this week in wrestling history, this is Bruce, and that's Benny. Benny, you want to take us out of here? The player Benny Scalia.
See you guys next week. Tune in again.
Later.